Welcome to the Narrate podcast, where we aim to tell God's story with our lives. We'll be continuing to post the Sunday message each week, but we want to dive a little deeper and offer some content to supplement your life with God, and that's where our Beyond Sunday series comes in. Join Adam and Narrate staff as they provide thoughtful discussions, ideas, and interviews that go beyond the message you'll hear on Sunday.
So we just spent, 3 full days at the C4SO Clergy conference. It was my first clergy conference, not my first time being around all those guys. It was your guys' first clergy conference. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I heard at the last council, I think you were there for this, Hannah, is as we're trying to thread this needle between not talking about it too much, but also not talking about it at all, it just felt like one of the things that we could do. And there was this desire for updates. So you guys... How much relationship with C4SO did you guys have before you stepped into that room? Maybe we start there.
That's a good question, because I don't think outside of Chris and Brad and Bishop Todd, I had met any of them in person. So there had been Zoom calls through the Anglican Foundation's classes, and then just different Zooms or phone calls with people I'd reached out to one-on-one. But, so I don't know. Is that a lot or not a lot?
I'm smiling because you name dropped that you've met with Bishop Todd face-to-face.
I don't think he remembered me.
Yeah. Really? You don't think he remembered that?
Well, I didn't get a chance to, talk to him one-on-one. He was one person. When I left the conference, I thought, oh, shoot, I didn't, get to talk to him. He was so busy.
He hid out a lot, I think.
He what?
I feel like he hid out a lot. You didn't see him kind of milling around very often.
You didn't see him a lot, so I left going, oh, dang it. But
the context for when you met him, maybe you should tell that story.
Oh, yeah. When Scott and I went to Nashville last May, just for vacation, he's in Franklin, which is not half hour, 45 minutes from Nashville. And I think you connected us over email, and we just asked if he would go to lunch with us, and he spent an hour and a half with us eating lunch and just answering our questions, and it was great.
I love when Scott tells a story, because he always says, I never thought I'd meet somebody who was just one person between me and Dallas Willard.
Yeah. He name dropped Dallas Willard so casually. It was kind of surprising. He was great. It was a really fun lunch.
So you hadn't met many people face to face, and how about you?
Yeah, same for me. I don't think outside of Chris I've met anyone face to face, just Zooms, kind of connection over the phone with a few people. No one in person though.
So what was your guys's, the big question is, what for you were your highlights of that time? We were going to record this in the car driving to St. Louis, where we could hear from our spouses as well, but somehow we forgot all about that in the midst of the construction and
between
Leslie just having to dead stare
Leslie
forward.
Throwing up and me falling asleep to Dramamine.
To sympathy throw up after I threw up.
Oh man, that was quite the deal.
I actually thought, I was thinking about it the whole time, but I was like, I literally can't move my head or I'm going to throw it, and then I did it anyway.
That's the worst feeling.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So anyway, so we didn't record then. So what would be a highlight, or as you guys are now 2 weeks removed, what stands out to you from that time?
Right away, I'd said the highlight was just seeing the people in person that you had Zoomed with or had talked on the phone with. And not everybody was at the conference, but the people that were there, it was really cool. And even some of the people in the Anglican Foundation's classes that you had been in your groups, it was really cool to see them in person instead of just their little Zoom box on your computer screen, and get to interact in real life. It's always a little different than, you think it's going to be for some reason. But because
you're currently, your context is there's a worship leaders thing that you're part of?
C4SO worship leader Zoom.
Is that a monthly thing?
Yep, once a month. And there's not a ton of people. It kind of varies. Sometimes there's 20-something people, and sometimes there's only 3 of us. So it just kind of varies week to week.
And then you're in the Anglican you're both in the Anglican Foundations program, which people listening might not know is just this pretty casual but organized 4-class series that is designed to help people exploring Anglicanism and really pastors exploring Anglicanism to just understand that better. So that's what you came into it with. I guess that's also what you came into it with. What was your highlight? Or how would you even begin to speak to that?
Yeah, I think for me, I felt like a couple of statements that when I was journaling afterwards, I wrote down. It was like a family reunion. I just hadn't met everyone yet because it felt like just this really genuine community of people that come together. And obviously there are differences and diversity, but all come together for this common cause. So that was one takeaway. And then another one I wrote down was like, it's a professional community I think I need, but I didn't know I needed it until I showed up at this place. And you're talking about just all these different things, and even just seeing the host church's hospitality and how Trish was running it. I was like, oh, I could learn so much from you. And so I've reached out to her. We already have a Zoom set up. So it's like, oh, this is so fun to get together with these people that do what you do and kind of nerd out. I was telling someone, I was like, I imagine this feels like how like engineers feel when they get together, or teachers or doctors. There's just this affinity immediately. And I really felt that at the conference.
It is true. I mean, like you have it, just to picture, we walked into this strange church, and there's
too early.
Yes, we were
way too early.
The first ones there, of course. So we walk in, and it's like I just had this picture in my head of like, not that I thought it was gonna be. I'm an introvert, right? So these things are like my nightmare. So I'm like, this is just gonna be one of those things where you stand in the corner and it's really awkward, and everybody knows each other and you don't, and there was like a little bit of that, but it was like not what everyone was so kind and so just kind of like it made us feel really welcome. And there were like not very many moments of that like this is awkward feeling for me, which I feel like I'm very sensitive to that. So I feel like that's saying something because it was pretty cool. So I definitely echo that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a higher compliment than I've heard you say that already, but just that I've actually told them that you feel like it was a family reunion of a family you didn't know you had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I accidentally had a study week last week, which I feel spoiled because the rest of you came back and scrambled on things, and I got to sit in my office and work on 2026. And the context where I came from, like Vern always had a really strong value for conferences and continuing ed. We were always going to a Willow Creek conference or a North Point conference, and then later education stuff. And so it was interesting because this was really mostly just, I guess, coincidence / the sovereignty of God. I had this study week last week and kind of was able to really fill a lot of thought for 2026 just from the conference, which I think is why you go to conferences. Wow. It's designed to really stimulate thought and idea and creativity for future stuff. And I was delighted by how much it had done that, because I was expecting the congeniality and the relationship, but the amount of resourcing that they did, considering we weren't sitting in classes very often, it didn't feel like.
Right.
There's some felt like pretty high level stuff. I mean, I've sat and paid big dollars for seminary classes that didn't offer as much content after 2 days as I feel like I took from that. So
I think that was another feeling I got, like there were just such high caliber leaders in the room, and you just kind of, or like myself, I just wanted to be amongst them and like try to soak up a little bit of that quality, Yeah.
That's a great, yeah, that's, even though it's kind of a smaller group and kind of obscure, there's some really high level leaders in there.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your ordination ceremony at all? That was kind of like the pinnacle
yeah, I don't know, what was that like for you guys? That was the first time you've seen high vestments.
Yeah. Well, the vestments didn't bother me because that's how my pastor looked at my church growing up.
Oh, okay. The robes and the whole deal.
Yeah, so that wasn't really out of the ordinary for me. But the ceremony was something I've never seen before or never. And I feel like in our last class in the Anglican Foundations was the one that talked about polity and structure, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they had, part of it was we'd gone through these different, what does it take to be ordained, and the different offices, and so I feel like I got a little bit of a what to expect. So it wasn't. I think it would have been different if it would have been
out of nowhere.
Yeah, out of nowhere.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
it was very formal. It was very there's a lot of steps to it. A lot of you guys had lines, they would, the bishop and this little entourage were up there, and then the people getting ordained were kind of standing in front, and very orchestrated. I thought it was really beautiful. Was kind of my takeaway.
It was long. It was like an hour and a half, wasn't it?
Yes. Yep. It was an hour and a half.
It was long, yeah.
But there was some music in there that I thought was pretty cool. It was a full church service, right? It was it was cool, and we took communion afterwards, which was one of my highlights of it. I just thought that was really special, and yeah.
How about for you, Hannah? What was that like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I expected it to be weird. I mean, the robes and they're not scarves. What are they called? The things with the color. I don't know.
Alb?
Well, the alb is the robe.
Oh, the
and then
stole.
The stole.
That's it.
There you go.
Well, it is familiar to me because I was also raised in the Lutheran church. So that, I don't know what it's called, but it's not shocking to see people in robes. But I was like, oh, this is going to be weird. I'm going to hate it. But as you were reciting what is it called?
Just the liturgy
Just
of
the
it?
liturgy of it. I was really struck by how serious it is. This is a very serious commitment you're making, not only to the people in that room, but to your church back home and the people that you lead. And so I found myself thinking, oh, this should be weird. I was thinking about a wedding. You put on clothes that you don't wear every day, or maybe never wear again in your life, and
ideally.
you proceed down this aisle, and the person marrying you says something, and you recite things back, and there's all this ceremony and tradition, and it's kind of weird, but it should be weird because you're making this really serious commitment, and so that's kind of what I was thinking about, this should be weird and kind of awkward and not normal and formal because it's really serious.
Yeah. Yeah, I've appreciated your perspective on that as I've thought about it too. It reminds me a little of, there's that, I think Tish is the one that tells the story of Ronald Rolheiser, where he's this very influential thinker, taught at Duke Seminary. I forget what his final religious background was. I think it changed a little bit, or denominational. But he was grieving how loose seminary has become, and that that you can get through seminary and have not taken certain classes. And his comment was, you couldn't show up to a med school and say, well, I don't want to take this class or this class or this class. They would say, you can't be a doctor if you're not going to take them. And his comment was, that's because we think doctors can hurt people, which leads to this inference of we don't actually think clergy can hurt people, or people with bad clerical training can hurt people. And as I was listening to, as I thought about that language, I thought back of that quote of, I've been ordained before in the evangelical church, and that was a privilege and an honor, and then the last thing I want to do is speak ill of that. But I can look back and see that it was a group of people who were so in that season committed to not being overly formal or liturgical that for me, the experience, it just kind of lacked weight. And I think some of that was probably my age. I was in my early 30s or late 20s when that happened. And so the weighted language of this and everything, I just appreciated, kind of like a presidential inauguration or a wedding or any of those other things.
Graduation.
There
are a lot of instances in our life where we put the the outfit on and walk through the ceremony. Yeah, Chase just landed in Taiwan yesterday, and the first thing they had to do was dress up in suit and ties, and there was a welcome ceremony. So even think about, I've never been to one, but the luau's in Hawaii, there's lots of times where we do really formal things. I'd shared a couple of the photos with Fred, and he had said, was that I can't remember exactly what he said, was that a very special experience for you or something? And I said,
Well, if you're referring to dopamine, then no. Like, it wasn't like going to the World Series in that respect. I'm not so far gone that I can't appreciate that there's some weirdness to it. But that's what I was able to say. But I have grown in my respect for the office of clergy and pastor and the responsibility that we carry, and can respect that they're really trying to convey that.
Yeah.
Not that offers assurance that there's not abuse of power and stuff as well. But
Sure.
anyway, you guys had never, I mean, that was going into that was one of those, like, I wonder what this is going to be like. So,
Well, and it was helpful too to meet a lot of these people, and you kind of get the feeling of, oh, they're just like normal people. I mean, they're obviously incredible humans, but you're like, oh, we can just chat and hang out and talk about hiking in Montana and whatever. And then, okay, oh yeah, and we can do this really serious thing
right.
too.
That's a
Like,
good
they're
point.
not always, you don't have to be weird all the time. Like, you can
Yeah.
recognize the formality of this, and you're still like a normal person.
And you could even see it afterwards in the little party afterwards, where some of those people, I mean, they left their alb and all their stuff on.
Yeah.
And then there were others. I mean, Chris, I don't even know if he got out the door before
Right.
his was off.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so that's part of one of my takeaways from that conference was just like, I love it's a very diverse group. And like any group, you find your affinity, but also there's just a lot of mutuality and respect even across lines of affinity. So I don't like the word clique, but it's obvious, like, everybody has their groups on some level, but the groups themselves seem to really respect one another and,
I
and
noticed that
anticipate
too.
that,
Yeah.
which is refreshing.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I can't put my finger on is, why do I value congeniality on a national level more than I would a like localized level? I think there's something about being in that room with people from, including Narrate, there's 17 states represented, I think, or is it 16 or something like that?
Wow.
Everything from, Gare in a big church in LA to my friend Michael, who leads a little tiny church in Waco, and everything in between like that. I can't quite put my finger on why there's that value for that diversity. I don't know. You have any thoughts on that?
Just like you're talking size wise.
Yeah, like, if I'm being honest, I wouldn't place the same value on going to a conference like that at the Metra in Billings that was, or anywhere, the location's not the thing, with pastors from all over the state.
Oh.
For me, there's, to me, part of the learning, and I think it's because we know as Montanans we're 10 and 20 years behind, and so there's just some value to being in these, where we're being challenged to rub elbows with people who are really in more advanced cultures than our own, I think.
That's fair. I mean,
that's the closest I can get to it.
yeah. I've never been to any kind of clergy gathering, whether it was in Montana or not, so I guess I don't have that perspective, but it was really cool to hear about other churches in other areas, other like cultures, what their like issues were. Like we did like a church forum, different forum groups where they kind of grouped us by size, I guess it was the best way.
Yeah, and you shorted
do
us
it.
by 30 people.
I know. Well, because when we all went around, we were like one of the biggest ones, so I didn't want to be that guy that was like 235 people. So I got nervous.
Just teasing. But anyway, sorry.
But
I took your
anyways,
full thought. And it would be 335.
335. Yeah, so I just said 300
That's
for the
my ego
record. I
sticks
shorted
out.
us. And I knew I was going to have to answer that too. I was like, I knew it. It's going to be me. No.
I was teasing. I think I said to Hannah afterwards, I was like, I got to tell Leslie, we work hard for those 30 people.
I know, and we can like notice those 30 in the room when they're not
Totally.
there.
Totally. Yeah. So we were it was like 200 to 400, 150 to 400. Is that the group we were
But the
in?
majority of people were like at the low end of that.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, it was just interesting to see like what the point of the forum was, to like get together and discuss like issues, things that come up in your church of that size, and just to see what other people's were was really interesting. Some of them, like, we could relate to, I think, but some of them we were like, like, I don't know. It's just like, it opens your mind a little bit to things that you might not have thought about before. And there's something kind of grounding about that connects you to something bigger than just our little bubble.
Right.
Yeah. One of the themes I felt like through the entire conference was contextualizing and like being taking what you know and like applying it to where you are, because Helen is different from LA, which is different from Arkansas, which is different from Atlanta, and I wonder if that's just so interesting.
Yeah, it's
like
fun.
if you're in Montana, it's like, well, we're all kind of rural and we're all kind of, but it's just more interesting and intriguing.
Yeah,
Like,
maybe that is it.
That for me, I just found that was
Because it was a consistent
fascinating.
theme. Everything people talked about or taught was like, and now you have to go and
Right.
take this to your context and make it work for you.
I loved one of the things Gare said. I'm actually going to tell this story this weekend, but the guy so Gare Jones leads Vintage Church, which I think is the biggest church in C4SO, but he is like one of the global leaders in leading Alpha. So I think we were in the same one, but as he was giving context, so people come from all over the world to be trained by him and his church how to lead Alpha in their church, which is an evangelism emphasis. And I loved when he said, he just kind of named, he said, I still haven't had anybody come up to me and say, oh, church in my context is so easy. And he just named that thing that we all do of this excuse of like, well, I think his exact quote was, the soil is so hard. And he's like, it's hard everywhere. Like, that was really good for me to hear, just because I'm as prone to that as any, is it's really easy to make excuses as to why church is hard in Helena. And it is, but his point was like, there's always going to be something that makes it difficult.
Right. It's just
appreciate
different
that.
in every city or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes back to your like high caliber leader of just, there's not a lot of people that could say that to me and I wouldn't discount them. But a guy who leads a church in LA and has had produced the fruit that they've produced, there's this chance to go like, you're right, we do. It's kind of like COVID. Like, we reach this point where like, we've got to stop using COVID as an excuse for
Right.
everything. So that was good.
Yeah.
Your spouses aren't here. It would actually be a fun separate one to
That'd be
get
fun.
get those three together and just see what their takeaways were. But would you dare offer anything of their takeaways or perspectives? What was that like for them? Or what was that like for you to have them with you? That is its own unique experience.
I loved that. I thought it was really fun to have Jonathan get to meet some of the worship people that I've been talking to, and and actually it was fun to have Scott came to the worship leader lunch thing, and so it was like our little worship team, and we were like a third of the room in there. And that was actually really, really fun. Jonathan really enjoyed it. He enjoyed the forums and just kind of being more immersed in that. That's kind of what I heard him say, and just getting to see us make connections with people was fun for him.
Yeah. Anything to add to that with Scott?
No, kind of similar. Like I just enjoyed having him there and getting to kind of experience this together. And then he said, I loved watching, the three of us make connections and meet people. And he was like, man, when you met Ashley Matthews, I thought you were going to fall over. You were so excited. So I think just watching us like get to make these connections, and he was like, it's so much fun just to tag along and be a part. So
I was grateful. I mean, they had invested their own money and resource to do all that, so it's huge. And as we all know, like, this work demands so much of the bigger picture of our lives, so it was fun to have them along. Yeah, well, I think we've said enough to just, I mean, for me, part of the goal is, I think collectively as a staff, we're so animated by and excited about, and yet at the same time don't want to talk too much about it or pretend like we're hiding something. So I think that gives some update on all of that. Next step would be, I don't know what. All right, thanks.
if you'd like to learn more about Narrate Church, find us online at narratechurch.org.
You can also look us up on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks for listening.